The purpose of this video is to help you generate ideas with respect to paper 2. Paper 2 is asking you what, if anything, the Black Power movement did for the overall movement that was the struggle for civil rights in the middle part of the 20th century. I noted in the paper prompt, the question prompt, that most people that participated in what can loosely be called the struggle for civil rights really didn't, probably wouldn't have qualified as what we have defined as Black Power. If you want me to simplify this a little bit more, if you want to think about this in terms of individuals, my point here is that most people would have come down on the side of somebody like a Martin Luther King rather than somebody like a Malcolm X. Okay, now that really is a loaded discussion for a lot of different reasons, but I do think that that's a pretty simplistic way of thinking about, where the numbers kind of fall. Now, I want you to think about this in the context of your book. Tyson's father, Timothy Tyson's father, the Methodist preacher, is a self-described Eleanor Roosevelt liberal. Okay. Now, if you think back to the 1930s and our discussions on somebody like Eleanor Roosevelt, Roosevelt really was one of those individuals that wanted the federal government to take a much more proactive role in protecting individuals that simply could not protect themselves. And of course, that meant racial, ethnic, national minorities. Okay. Now, to that end, what people like Tyson's father really subscribed to was very much a white-centric approach, Anglo-centric, however you want to think about it. It was very much white paternalism, if you want to be really critical of that approach. In other words, the white community would not only have some sort of involvement with bringing about full equality of people of color, but it would be in positions of authority and decision-making abilities. What I mean by that is it's not just that white people would be participating in the broader struggle, but it would almost be like progress would be dictated by the white community. Now, for reasons that I'm willing to bet you can understand, that might come across as kind of condescending to the people that individuals like Eleanor Roosevelt or Reverend Tyson are trying to empower. The other thing that I want to point out with respect to an individual like Reverend Tyson, his mother also, is that these individuals were very much inclined to buy into the kind of activism that people like Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Diane Nash had been subscribing to for much of the 1950s and a good chunk of the early 1960s. Direct activism, a march on Birmingham, sit-ins in Nashville's lunch counters, freedom rides all across the South. All of these things were generally met with support from the progressive community, the white community, even in places throughout the South, in the case of the Tysons, North Carolina. Black Power was a completely different animal. And it was an animal that the progressive white community really didn't know what to do with. And not necessarily for reasons that they wanted to hold on to power in some form or fashion. It's just that it had never really been seen before. People of that generation couldn't wrap their mind around it because they had no tangible examples that they could point to in the past. And so you get an individual from Blood Done Sign My Name like a Rob Williams. And if you're interested in Williams, I've loaded up a documentary film entitled Negroes with Guns. The idea of African American men standing up for their rights and standing up for equality, even if that meant yielding and using guns, it was beyond radical. It was unthinkable. And if you watch that documentary film, I think that you will come to grips with how just foreign this was to the white mindset, even as late as the 1960s. Okay, an individual in Tyson that another individual in Tyson that really encapsulates the concept of Black Power would be Ben Chavis. Chavis was a representation of Black Power, but he was an individual that really didn't rely on any kind of white paternalism when it comes to securing those rights. Keep in mind, one of the ways that I've been using to describe Black Power is the Malcolm X quote of by any means necessary. Be peaceful with those people that are peaceful with you, but if somebody puts their hands on you, do your best to make sure that they don't put their hands on anybody else. Again, this is a very radical concept in the middle part of the 20th century because the assumption really is white supremacy, and I don't mean the Nazi Party or the KKK or something along those lines. I simply mean the mindset that is, even if you're trying to help secure civil rights and civil equality, it's generally handed down from the white community to those that they're trying to empower. And clearly, I think by reading Blood Done Sign My Name, you can see that the Tysons fit that description. Okay? But I guess the question that we really need to ask ourselves is how successful was this Black Power movement? Um, I think that it's successful in a number of different ways. I think that it's successful in installing a great source of pride within the Black community. Certainly, that's what some of the individuals, Jesse Jackson would be an example of this, Muhammad Ali would be another really good example of pride and honor being associated with African American heritage, African American and African history as well. Um, I think that it did um, capture the attention of the white power structure. Again, I don't mean the Klan or the Nazis. I mean the powers that be in liberal democratic America. I think that it really did give the power structure a choice to make. Martin Luther King that's asking for integration, or Malcolm X that's talking about a much more radical approach to civil rights. Um, I think it really forced that issue and forced more and more white liberals to come down on the side of MLK. Um, but like anything else, there are limitations to this. And a limitation that I need you to be mindful of is that the white community didn't quite know what to do with any of this. A good example would be what you've got going on in Oakland, California with the rise of the Black Panther Party. Okay? And similar to Williams and Negroes with Guns, it was a completely different vision of African American activism, African American assertiveness when it comes to demanding civil rights and civil equality. Um, at the same time, it scared people. At the same time, this image of angry black men in trench coats, yielding shotguns, talking about the white police officers as if they were pigs, and preaching about white devils. Um, my point in all of this is that this very well may have isolated potential allies. Now, again, you could make the case that these are allies that kind of think of themselves as people that are in a position to hand out exactly how much civil rights and civil liberties that they feel necessary, but nonetheless, white liberals were an instrumental part of what became the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Great Society, the War on Poverty, things that individuals like Martin Luther King said did a great deal of made a great deal of progress when it comes to civil rights and integration in American life. I didn't get a great chance to talk about this in the mainstream lectures, but there does come a point that these civil rights institutions, the once upon a time proud biracial institution that is SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, there comes a point in time where they more or less demand that all the white people leave. Now, they're doing this for very specific reasons, that this needs to be, in their minds anyway, this needs to be a struggle by African Americans for African American empowerment, but it's also fracturing the movement, okay? So with this discussion, I'm really hopeful that I've pointed out to several different examples of what Black Power did. It did achieve tangible results. Some of them you can kind of see were quite positive, but it also complicated matters in the sense that in the end, not only did it isolate potential allies within the white community, for critics of the civil rights movement, for people that weren't so keen on the idea of social equality for all, it provided a very useful um, political whipping boy is the point that I'm trying to make. This angry individual that was now wielding guns, it made for good racial politics when it comes to reactionary politicians that are going to go after the white vote that is potentially scared of the kind of civil rights activism that they see. And so, in a lot of ways, I think what you're going to see when the Black Power movement doesn't necessarily go away, but it kind of subsides a little bit, what you're going to see by the 1980s is almost, well, it is absolutely a political reorganization, and you're almost going to see a backtracking of the movement. You're going to see, and a lot of people make this case, um, civil rights go in reverse. Now, it's not as simple as I'm making it here. There's a lot of other reasons why this is the case, but at the same time, the legacy of Black Power cannot be ignored when it comes to the limitations that it also ultimately levied on the movement. So once again, I'm very hopeful that I've provided maybe a little bit of guidance when it comes to what I expect and how to approach the dissecting of this essay. As always, if you have individual questions, please don't hesitate to let me know, and best of luck to all of you.